Hello and welcome to Buy Africa, the show where we focus on investment opportunities around the continent. I'm Tshepo Modiba and thanks for joining me. Tonight I'm joined by Dexter Mahachi, research analyst at Momentum SP Reid, and we're focusing on the sugar sector. Dexter, your general thesis, what's going on in sugar around the world? I know sugar prices have pulled back quite dramatically. Your sense of the outlook?
I think the outlook is going to remain a bit depressed for some time there, because there's a global surplus.
Right. Simply
because in Brazil they managed to they effectively managed to overproduce, and in a way that has resulted in a bit of oversupply in the global markets. It's something which has affected everybody.
Which doesn't bode well for the African players.
Not at all, because what you find is that the sugar sector in Brazil, with the collapse of the real, they're actually getting more money by exporting the commodity. Right. So what you find, because of their low production costs and their ability to produce such high volumes, they've been exporting their sugar at a massive rate, which means that African countries have been exporting to places like the EU and even Caribbean countries as well, sure, who have been exporting to the EU. They're bound to find it very tough and competitive, simply because of the entrance of Brazilian sugar, which will now be officially allowed to compete at the same level as with the African and Caribbean producers internationally.
Okay, and the outlook or the current setting on the continent?
I think what has been happening is that a lot of the African producers like Zambia, even Swaziland and Malawi have been looking at trying to, and Malawi have been looking at trying to export their products intra-Africa, that in a way try to promote intra-Africa trade.
Right.
I think COMESA has been a lead player in this and trying to get those countries which have a sugar surplus to export to those African countries with a sugar deficit, right, in an effort to promote intra-regional trade. So that's part of what has also allowed some of the companies to at least stand their ground and be able to compete. Sure. Further to this, some of the producers, such as Zambia and also Malawi, are some of the globally, they're some of the lowest cost producers. They produce sugar at right about 250 to 300 US dollars per metric ton,
so which
is very competitive. So they're still able to at least export part of their produce into global markets.
Right.
So it's not as dire a situation for some of those efficient producers, but the other less efficient producers are in a quandary, really.
So it's pretty much the case that we see with all commodities, or commodity related. Yeah. When prices get depressed, it's really the most efficient players who do
survive.
Well.
That's basically the story here. And the sugar prices haven't helped. I think in January they were sitting around about 15 US cents per pound. Now they're around 11 US cents per pound.
Right, that's a significant
that's quite a big fall. So it's been a question of how low can you go in terms of your production costs. Yeah.
Right, let's zone in on the one area that's actually suffering a deficit from a sugar perspective. Yeah. We touched on Kenya in particular. Sure. East Africa, how are we looking as a dynamic there?
As a dynamic, I think East Africa, of course, one of the biggest problems they have there is the fact that the energy costs in East Africa are so much higher than those in Asian countries. So you find that there's a lot of exports from Asia filtering through into the market, into Tanzania, into Uganda, and a few other countries as well. Right. But on the bright side, the consumption of sugar, particularly in Kenya, is quite high.
So
and
local demand is high.
Demand has been quite significant, and this has managed to at least keep a lot of the sugar manufacturers afloat, because they can at least offload some of their products into the market.
And what has caused the shortage in Kenya in particular?
I think Kenya is a bit of a special case, really. There's a lot of problems in the sugar industry in Kenya, and solving those problems is something which has been very protracted, and it has actually outlasted several administrations in Kenya. Of particular note, you'll find that the plants are inefficient. and so they tend to produce less sugar cane per ton of.
And what makes them inefficient? Is it because the
they're
land
just
is so
old?
small? Okay.
They're just old, and they need replacement. They need a lot of maintenance. And right now, Kenya is actually supposed to be in a bit of a shortage period, simply because a lot of the sugar manufacturers have been undergoing care and maintenance. They had shut down their plants, so there's less sugar filtering into the market, which has created a deficit. They normally have they normally average about 9,000 tons of sugar on standby. Now they are around 4,000, and
wow.
Things are a bit tricky at the moment.
That's a significant drop. So how do you make up for the shortfall?
Well, the solution for Uhuru Kenyatta and the Kenyan government has been to try and open the doors to regional imports.
Right.
Of course, this has come under a lot of flack from some of the opposition players, because people believe that their vested interests. People believe that they have vested interest in the government actually doing that. But if we were to look at it from a neutral's perspective, it seems like the right thing to do. If you look at it, Uganda normally has a production surplus of about 100,000 to 200,000 metric tons per annum. Right. Kenya, on the other hand, has a shortage of about 200 to 250,000 metric tons per annum. It makes sense to import sugar directly from your neighbor rather than get it all the way from Brazil, because people aren't stopping consuming sugar. So one way or the other, people need the sugar. So you can either get it from your neighbor or get it from Brazil and the global markets. And I think the approach taken by the Kenyan government is to try and sit down with the Ugandan government, get them to export some produce into the country, and also get them to sign trade agreements whereby they are also allowing Kenyan beef to be exported into Uganda at lower rates. So in that way, they would get a win-win situation. Sure. Unfortunately, some members of the opposition and other people within the Kenyan Manufacturers Association do not see it that way. They more or less would prefer the status quo, where the shortage remains, and there are a lot of grey imports coming in from Asia and a few other countries as well.
Okay. Now, at I guess underlying company level, are there any businesses that, and how are they surviving in this environment?
I think really, if we look at how the companies have been going, a typical company, a Kenyan sugar company to look at would be someone like Mumias.
Yes.
Mumias has been in turmoil. I think for the past 3 years they've made losses. Right. They actually recently issued a profit warning. The problems there stem from the fact that the production costs are too high. Right. The cane, specifically the type of cane that they use in Kenya, has a lower yield of sugar per ton when compared to that which is realized in neighboring countries like Uganda and also Malawi and also Zambia as well. And so you find that what you will find is that the cost per ton of sugar is about 30 Kenyan cents cheaper in Uganda than in Kenya. Sure. So you find that with the fact that their production costs are so high, then they also are in the process of acquiring a lot of, most of their produce is given to them from smallholder farmers who tend to produce it in an inefficient manner. If we look globally, the most efficient producers are actually large estates, which you get in Brazil and also in Swaziland, in Zambia, and in Malawi as well. Right. So they tend to produce their sugar at a much lower cost of production, simply because of economies of scale. Right. In Kenya, however, Mumias has to buy it from a lot of smallholder companies who they support in terms of providing them with inputs for them to actually grow the cane in the first place. However, there is a lot of cane poaching, which is whereby you support a farmer, you give him the inputs for him to grow the sugar cane in order for him to sell it to you. Of course, what that means is that you are releasing some of your resources there, and you're sacrificing some of your resources to somebody. But at the end of the day, at the end of the marketing season, when they're supposed to harvest that sugar cane and sell it to you, they sell it to someone else at a higher price, simply because the other player is able to provide a higher price to these guys because they haven't been supporting them in order to produce the cane in the first place.
Right.
So you find that yourself, if you have been supplying finance for these farmers to produce this sugar cane, you end up in a bit of a quandary and with a shortage in terms of the actual cane that you actually take through to the manufacturing stage.
So I guess to become bullish on Kenyan sugar, you'd need some sort of policy change that allows for I guess consolidation within the farming sector to decrease prices.
I think really what...
Or costs rather.
Yeah, I think really in my view what they should actually do is they should just go ahead and allow just to take you back a second, COMESA has been giving Kenya tariff protection for almost 5 to 7 years.
Right.
Almost every year they've been renewing the tariff protection to protect the Kenyan industry, sugar industry, from regional players, and as a result, regional countries in the region like Uganda, like Tanzania, like Malawi, like Zambia, who produce sugar in excess, cannot really freely trade the sugar with Kenya. What I believe is that those COMESA, they should allow that industry to face competitive pressures. This might result in a lot of adjustment and will probably mean that certain farmers will move away from planting sugar into other areas. But the consumer will benefit ultimately in the end because, first of all, the resources that these guys were using to produce the sugar cane, they can now channel to other crops and other products where they're a lot more efficient and a lot more productive.
Right. And
on the other hand, the consumer themselves will actually face a lot of, they'll actually be able to buy the sugar at lower prices because of all the extra competition and what that will do.
Perfect. Let's leave it there. Yeah. Thanks to my guest, Dexter Mahachi, research analyst at Momentum SP Reid, touching on the Kenyan sugar industry. That's all from Buy Africa this week. Remember to follow me on Twitter, that's at Modiba_Tshepo, and send us your thoughts about the show using the hashtag BuyAfrica. From myself and the team, goodbye.